if you didn't have analytics data and you were doing SEO for a client, if you were doing link building, or if you were doing, if you were, you're doing link building to try to get improvements to rankings.
Google Analytics is something that people do get really confused sometimes because there is a big stuff going inside. I mean, like
3 months later, I have these results. Or you can say, hey, I updated the page, and 1 month later, I have this result.
has been changed, especially in the portion of analytics landscape or even the overall digital marketing as well.
Is that 80% of your efforts or of your results come from 20% of your efforts? Well, if
Yep.
you don't know what 100 is,
Welcome to the Agency Growth Lab. I'm your host, Rohin Dua, and today we are thrilled to have a very special guest joining us, Jeff Sauer from Data Driven You. And Jeff is also a renowned expert in digital marketing, a speaker, an educator, and an SEO, of course. So Jeff is here today to share his insights and experiences with us. So welcome to the show, Jeff. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me. I'm excited to talk about all things agency and SEO and everything. So let's do it.
Yeah. Now, like I said, I've been following your stuff for quite a while, so it's just a privilege to have you on the show, man. And yeah, it's definitely there's a lot we can talk about it. I know you got a big wealth of knowledge sitting with you for agency scaling, how to take a data-driven approach, that kind of thing. So let's jump in and let's talk about
Okay,
it.
perfect.
So, Jeff, I'm like really quickly, can you tell us a bit about your journey in the digital marketing industry? How did it get started? Because everyone's having some story, what I know. So yeah,
Yeah.
story.
Yeah, sure. So I'll do the quick one. And I started out as a low rent web designer who
Oh,
made websites that nobody went to. And one of my clients asked me how to get traffic to the website. I poured myself into it. It became learning SEO, learning paid ads, and then they wanted to know, how do you get more people to buy and to convert? How do you know what happens when they're on their site? And I became an analytics person. This is
yeah,
about 15 to 20 years ago when nobody was doing it. And so
yeah,
I became a self-taught person in that area, doing it somehow for big clients, even when I was pretty young. And then had an agency that did this. And then I ended up leaving the agency and becoming a full-time educator because there's just not enough people who knew this world.
yep.
And so I wanted to help people out. And so that's what I do now is I'm a full-time educator at datadrivenu.com, like you mentioned. And then we have a new thing called measureu.com, which is an even bigger platform for people to learn this stuff.
Oh yeah. And you still in client SEO, that kind of things? I mean, like I would say client SEO could be PPC or could be Google Ads, anything like that. You still doing that or you
Yeah, a
already
little
done?
bit, but just enough to stay sharp. Most of
Oh
the
yeah.
stuff is done in the education, and then we do have some done for you services, but it's very selective. So we sort
Oh
of
yeah.
work with the cream of the crop of the people who need help, but we have a partner network that we send most of our leads out to.
Updates. Yeah, no, that's true because every time when I try to watch your videos or even your courses, there's always something special into them, especially when this Google Analytics, Google PPC ads kind of stuff as well. So there's always cool
Yeah.
stuff you have included. So pretty good educator you are.
Thank
So
you.
data approach for the people who just starting out, doesn't know much about it, doesn't know the value of the data-driven approach. Tell us a bit about it. Why is it really important? Why is it not just to
Yeah.
go in, display the board and start taking the clients and start working on it?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, there's some value in being a self-starter and just going and doing stuff, right? Like just putting stuff out there.
Yeah.
Ultimately, you need some kind of level of data or metrics to know if it's working or not. So when I started, this is before really web analytics, before Google Analytics was there, I started measuring direct mail pieces. And direct mail, you'd send out a piece of mail to somebody and you'd pay like $5 to put it into their mailbox.
Yep.
And you wouldn't know until 9 months later or a year later whether or not you had the right message or not, the right colors, the right creative and stuff like that. And
Yep.
I was like, wow, this is archaic. This is crazy that you have to wait that long to get these results. And then I started doing web only or internet only, and I could get those answers within a few minutes or within a few hours. And
Yep.
so I was just excited to say, okay, well, I could do a bunch of things, but I need feedback. And data is feedback ultimately. The market tells you whether something's working or not. And so the analogy I have is that you can be a self-starter all you want. You can post on your LinkedIn, you can do SEO stuff, you can do link
Yep.
building, but like if you don't have some kind of feedback loop, then chances are that that you're just spending a lot of time on things that are not effective. We all know about like the 80-20 rule, the Pareto principle. And the idea is that 80% of your efforts or of your results come from 20% of your efforts. Well, if
Yep.
you don't know what 100 is, if you don't know that there's 100 results, you wouldn't be able to know what's the 80 and what's the 20. And so that's part of how this comes down, is that you have to have some kind of feedback mechanism. Data is the feedback mechanism. So ultimately, it's a difference between doing something and then just hoping that it works, and then doing something and then being able to say whether it worked or not, so you can double down or you can move on to something else. It just helps you make decisions, the right decision, faster.
Yeah, no, that's true. Because and it's really very important to do these kind of tests as well to get the collector real kind of a data. Because if you're not doing the test, you probably be testing on the client projects, which is not
Yeah.
really good, I reckon. So yeah, no, this is very true to have a data-driven approach in the agency as such. So like you said, 20 years you've already spent in the industry, something like that. So a lot of has been changed, especially in the portion of analytics landscape or even the overall digital marketing as well. What kind of like a biggest shifts you have seen in these 20 years in the analytic side of the Google?
Yeah, I mean it's been huge. So it started out like just Google Analytics when that was released. It was pretty revolutionary because there was nothing like it. There was no free tool that would measure clickstream data and stuff like that. And so that was the beginning. And then for a while, it just got better at adding in other sources of data. So it'd be like this Google Analytics tool would tell you who went to your website, where they clicked, and stuff like that. Then it got better at saying, well, how did that impact your SEO? How did that impact your paid ads? How did that impact other things? So you could integrate it well.
Yep,
And then, and actually that was sort of like the entire 2010s was basically like, how do we add more stuff into our analytics? And
yep,
then the GDPR came out, which is like the European privacy regulations. And it's like, oh, you can't do this stuff. You can't share data between cookies. You can't have these transfers. And it started to shift the industry again. And that shift went to what can you actually measure?
yep,
What can you do? Do we really need this data?
yep,
Is this important to us? And then there started to be more silos of data and things like that. And then that got sort of shaken up or exasperated when Google Analytics 4 came out, and it's basically a privacy first version of Google Analytics. It's a lot more minimalist. It's a mobile first version, and that completely changed what analytics is. And so it allows you to do way more, but you have to be a lot more targeted. And back in for the first 15 years of Google Analytics, all you needed to do is put code on your site and you had value. Now you have to actually think about it a little bit more. So it's been interesting. It's like a maturing of the industry.
yep,
But it's mostly in reaction to having to deal with all these data challenges around privacy and what people's preferences are.
yep. So why do you think like Google they released this GA4 if everything was going all right with UA as well?
They didn't
What
have a
was
choice. Yeah, they didn't really have a choice. Yeah, so everything was going fine with UA for the
yeah,
users. This UA means Universal Analytics, which is the
right.
version of Google Analytics that was around from 2006 until about 2022. Um, interface was beautiful. I've been to Google's campus many times, and I've talked to the UX people, and they're like, "Hey, how do you use it?" And they watched me use it, and then they made those changes into the interface.
Oh
And
yeah.
now there's GA4 where there's like no identity to the software. It's just like it's a minimum. It's minimalist, right? It doesn't really have the love in the product.
Yep.
But yeah, ultimately they had a lot of personal data on their books. It was all stored in servers in the US. They had tons of like cookie debt. They had tons of technical debt in the platform. And if they would have kept that data for any longer, they would have probably gotten fined by the EU. There's all kinds of different regulations, and I think they didn't really have a choice. I think they had to basically stop doing the old one because it would have been too expensive to fight it or to keep it alive. And
Yep.
it's not a profit center for them. It's not something that really makes them money. The only way that it makes you money is if you spend more money on ads.
On
And so
ad.
keeping SEO data for the last 15 years is not really something they care about. In fact, that hurts them more than it helps them. There's almost no business case for them to keep UA as it was, even though
Yep.
we love it, beloved to users. And so that's the challenge, right? It's like we love it, yet they have no business reason to keep it around.
Oh yeah. No, I completely agree. But I don't know why, but it's sometimes like a lot of people I think agree with me as well. Google Analytics is something that people do get really confused sometimes because there is a big stuff going inside. I mean, like there is a lot of options and everything. So a proper training and that kind of things are really important, I guess. But let's talk about really general. I mean, like if any agency, if not the entire GA, but at least what are the key components those agency owners should be having in their mind or must be learned to get the best benefit of Google Analytics up to some extent, I mean.
Yeah, yeah. So, I mean, it really depends on what your agency is. So let's just say that you're an SEO agency and you do this for clients, right? Let's just make that assumption. So if you're using analytics, like what could you get out of it? Well, the first thing I'd say is that I have a free course on SEMrush, like the SEMrush Academy, and it's just GA4 for SEO. So I'd recommend anybody take that. It's like a 60-minute course, and it just shows you, instead of me telling you on a podcast, it just shows that part. So if you want to link to that in the notes, it's on SEMrush, it's free,
Oh,
and it's easy to do. But the idea here is, what are you trying to measure, and what do your clients value? And so I think that this is more of an existential question than just like push this button or push that button,
oh
because
yeah.
ultimately that can be important, but I believe that the agency business is a relationship business. So if you're forming a relationship with your customers, ultimately you want to use the data to support the efforts that you've done, like to support to report on them and to support them. You also want to use the data and the metrics to correlate that to revenue, to outcomes that are happening. You want to use that as a way to determine how much traffic is being generated by the things you do. So
Yep,
ultimately, it is sort of this thing where if you didn't have analytics data and you were doing SEO for a client, if you were doing link building, or if
yep,
you were doing, if you were, yeah, you're doing link building to try to get improvements to rankings, or if you
yep,
were doing on-page SEO to try to get more that page to do better.
yep.
If you don't
That
have analytics installed, you'll just be like, hey, I followed best practices, and I'm not a
oh,
fan of best practices. I think best practices are garbage because they're somebody else's um, there's somebody else whittling down the things they did into like one trick, and it's never one trick. It's always a lot more than that.
yep,
So if you don't have data, you're just following best practices, and best practices are not proven, right? So you don't know if it's going to work or not. Versus if you do something and you look at the data, you can say, hey, I started the link building project on this day, and 3 months later I have these results. Or you can say, hey, I updated the page, and 1 month later I have this result. So if you don't have data, then how are you going to do that? Now,
ex
Google Analytics is confusing to get that set up, but ultimately that fundamental is still there, whether you're using Universal Analytics
yep.
or Google Analytics 4. And in fact, it's actually better in Google Analytics 4. It just takes a little bit more work to set that up.
Oh yeah, yeah. And do you reckon the AI has entirely changed the complete landscape as well in the form of Google Analytics? Or
Yeah, I mean,
maybe not just the Google Analytics. I think the overall industry thing has been changed because it is a lot more easy to actually correlate all this kind of data together. So how the
yeah.
data approach and AI you guys are mixing out together at the moment, or actually educating your students to take a best advantage of that?
Yeah, yeah, for sure. I mean, so AI, like, yes, AI, AI is sort of like everything. It's like it's a yes and, right? Like it's not
Yeah,
like AI can improve everything you do. It can improve the content you write. It can improve the
yeah,
outreach you do to get links. It can improve everything. From an analysis perspective, the AI is only as good as its ability to integrate the data into the prompt engine or to the engine that you have, right? So um, Chat GPT can read more data now. Claude can read more data. So you could potentially, like, I have like a file with the data. And I say, tell me what happened with this data, right? So like analyze this data. So you have to have a prompt and some data and tell them what you want. And you can have them summarize what you saw into key points. You can have them do some of the math for you. You can do a lot of things with that. But ultimately, it's only as good as your ability to get it into the system. So
mm,
if there's a native integration, that's a lot easier. If you have to like export it, import it, massage the data and stuff like that, it can be a little more challenging. If you run up against row limits, that can be challenging. But the idea is that yes, AI can summarize things better than you probably ever could, once it has the right level of integration.
yeah,
But it's more of a summary at this point than it is a end all be all.
yeah,
One thing that's nice is that it will help you write better code. It will help you with syntax, and it will help you with a lot of things. So I look at it as like AI makes everything we do 10 to 20% better right now, sometimes 100% better.
Mm.
But it's really that integration of it that's really going to be the true force multiplier for what we're doing.
Yeah, I agree to this because we can't rely 100% on the AI. The old school stuff still applies, where to read the data, to correlate that data properly, and take the smart decisions accordingly. So yeah, I agree to this 100%. Let's talk about that Gen Z growth because this is one of my favorite topic as well. What's yours best way? Is that a niche-based agency or a journal-based agency? Because it is really very hard to say sometimes like, hey, there's a lawyer sitting around with a $3,000 check sitting in the hand, and you're saying, no, I work with the plumbers only. So what's
Yeah,
your
yeah.
about that? Which one do you prefer, Jeff?
Yeah, I mean, I think that niching down is like a misunderstood and nuanced conversation. So I'm gonna have to go a little bit in depth in this one to come back to where we're at. But I think when somebody's first starting out, it's generally a good idea to do the same service over and over again because there are economies of scale. Like
Yeah,
if you're doing web design and then you want to do, like, if you were to take on a paid search project, it would take you forever to do that because you don't do that every day. But if you have 10 web clients, you just keep on cranking through it and then you're good to go, right? You just do it and do it and do it,
yeah,
and you have the same team, the same people going through things. So there's a lot of cost savings and efficiency in doing the same type of project over and over again. So if you're an SEO agency doing that over and over again, if you gain efficiency, now that's with doing the work, right? Now that's what I call a service niche, right? And then there's the client niche, which is plumbers, like you said, lawyers. Now the efficiency on that actually comes from your outreach or how you find them, because it's easier to, instead of going after every service business in the world, it's easier to get a list of plumbers and go after them, or to get a list of lawyers and go after them, right? Way easier to find them because you're specific. And so if your way of getting customers is to find them and to be like, hey, I work with plumbers and that's all I do, then you don't have to send as many emails and you're going to get a higher success rate because you're more specific to what they're looking for.
yeah,
Now, the thing that I think is misunderstood is that I think that I look at niching as the client niche, like the industry you go after or the type of client. That's something that's your outbound efforts. That's how you present yourself. But if somebody comes to you and says, I need the same thing, but I'm a lawyer and their money looks good and they're there, I wouldn't turn them down because it just doesn't make sense. Like
yeah,
ultimately revenue is revenue. And like there's no that's like an arbitrary principle. It doesn't really help you out because your team is still doing things the same way. Like you have the efficiency of having done paid ads for that person. So it's like the same. Um, or very similar. Like there's not that much of a difference between doing ads for a local company versus another local company.
yeah,
So it's more of an outbound thing. And then it comes down to the funny thing is that people don't ever tell you is that if you want to scale your business, like my agency scaled to high seven figures, and sold in 2021. And in order to get to that point, you have to have a breadth of services. So you
yeah,
start by niching down for efficiency across a team, but then if you expand, then you can get higher value clients, you can do
sure,
higher value services, you can have a longer term relationship, and you can lock that in. And
yeah,
usually, then that works out better for you economically, and the margins are higher. There's so much better stuff to doing that. So it's like niche down to get on the map, then expand sideways with the services scopes that you do, continue to be good at them, but then that's how you increase the value. And then you can go after plumbers and say, hey, I'm a full service marketing agency for plumbers or something like that. And that makes it even better. So I actually think that niching too hard is a mistake, but I think that not doing it at all also is a mistake because you can't ever get momentum and you don't have a identity as to what your business is.
exactly right. And when working with a different variety of projects, you get a kind of a taste and you keep the momentum going as well because you see, okay, this industry is getting these kind of challenges that actually
Yeah.
give you a kind of a brainstorm and say like, okay, in this is something I can do better as well. For example, funnels. You understand the pain point of a plumber, but the pain points for let's say the doctors could be different, the dentist could be different. So that's where I guess it is good to go into the
Yeah.
different industry as well. Maybe not directly,
Yeah.
maybe
Yeah.
bring up a sister concern sites or something like a small
Yeah, I mean,
company.
there's something to be said for industry knowledge. Like we niched really hard in like the replacement windows and siding on a house industries, and we had somebody who worked in that industry, and it made the sales easier because we understood their language. It made
Yep.
campaigns perform better as well. So yeah, but I think you can get that without necessarily having that knowledge. You have to like, you can take one client and be successful, and then you can extrapolate. That's pretty much what we did. It's like
Mhm.
you get one success story and you amplify that, as opposed to, I think people like, the worst thing you can do, in my opinion, is to be like, see somebody else who's bragging about how successful they are, and then be
Yep.
like, I should do that same thing. And
Yep.
it's like, oh yeah, I'm crushing it in solar right now.
Oh,
Then you're like, oh, I'm gonna be a solar company because I saw somebody that. And what you don't understand is that that person's been doing it for 5 years. They're finally
oh,
like talking about it publicly after they've built a moat around their business, and you
yep.
could never recreate their success. So copying somebody's success when they're surfacing is not a good idea, because you're basically setting yourself back 5 years, and the
Yep.
conditions 5 years from now when you get there won't even be the same. So it's like you'll never be able to be that person. You need to be
Yep.
yourself, right?
Yeah, exactly, exactly right. I'm sure a lot of people talk to you as well, but when I talk to some of the agency owners, that what is the biggest thing they struggle about? That's always the lead generation. The people they feel on
Yep.
fancy reading in the Facebook groups or doing some courses, they feel like, okay, let's open up an agency, register the company and all that, but then they keep on struggling to get the quality leads for their agency. So what's
Yep.
your best take on that one? What do you think would be the best way possible for them, who, especially for the people who are just starting out, to grab the very first new leads for their agency, the good leads, and
Yeah.
qualify them properly as well?
Yeah. I think that, so there's like 5 awareness states. You probably heard of them before, but it's unaware of you, problem aware, solution aware, product aware, and then fully aware. Okay. So they're
Yep.
on a continuum. And the fully aware people are by far the best leads. And
Yep.
it's not even close. Somebody
Yep.
who's unaware of you has a lower response rate, and they're not likely to buy from you. You need to go through all 5 awareness states in order to get somebody to be a customer that lasts for a long time.
Yep.
And so, what's easier to do? Is it easier to take somebody who already knows who you are and to sell them, or somebody who doesn't know who you are, or
Yep.
somewhere in between? So you just, honestly, the easiest thing to do is start with people who are fully aware, people who you've worked with before, former clients,
Yep. Who
current
know?
clients, and try to get, and that's how you get your revenue boost, working with them, your best customers, right? Or your, and even if you're just getting started, there's somebody who will trust you. Mine was my old job. Like, they just kept on paying me when I left the job to start my business, right? Because they're like, hey, I'll, yeah. So I call it an anchor client. So like, the first thing you want to do is try to find one anchor client, and that's usually the income that you need in order to go. It's like about half of your income, and about at least half of your income, and between 25 and 50% of the hours that you were doing
Yep.
before. So it gives you stability, so you can go out on your own, take that anchor client, and just service them, be great with, go with them, and then try to find the next one. Now, there's probably not, if you're just getting started, there's not a lot of people who are fully aware of you, unless you
Yep.
have like a blog, unless you have some kind of, unless you're active on social. So one thing you can do is just be active on these channels in order to get people who are fully aware of you. Like, try to get an audience, try to get people to do that. Well, if you don't want to do that, if that doesn't come naturally to you, or you don't believe in it, or you don't want to make that investment, then the next thing is you need product aware. Like, how does somebody become product aware of you? You could do Google ads for a search, like SEO agency. It's probably going to be really expensive. Like, that product aware can be really expensive, because that's what most paid search things are. So
Yep.
then it's like, okay, well, you have to develop that over time. It might still be content marketing. It might be putting yourself out there. It might be attending conferences.
Yep.
The reason why people like, why sales calls work so well is because you can take somebody from unaware to fully aware on
Yep.
one call. Or if you
Yep.
go to a conference, you can do that same thing. You can talk to somebody like, hey, here's what I do, right? Basically, you have to fight for somebody's attention. And then
Yep.
once you have their attention, you, in a non-pushy way, you need to give them the confidence that you are the right person to solve their problems. And so
Yep.
I say focus more on solving problems and talking about how you can fix something versus doing cold outreach. I think cold outreach is the hardest one to get right, the lowest percentage of success, and the one that people fail on the most, because they start with that first. Why
Yep.
would you ever go after the least aware people when you have all these low hanging fruit of people who are ready to work with you, if you just put a little bit of effort in? And so
Yeah.
I'd say build the relationships, and then you leverage those.
Yep. Do you reckon that the brand awareness is really important, to go with the brand, build it out, go put a right kind of a content in front of the right audience? It could be Facebook group, LinkedIn, or all the different kind of places. Then to pitch out the people who are just starting out. I mean, like your friends, your family members, or anyone who know you, know your product, and could be easy to
Yeah.
get converted. And the third one could be once we get a confidence about that one, then the next stage comes down is running ads to spend the money on the ads, because that's where a lot of people they actually do lack about. They don't know when is the right time to do to leave the organic stuff, or not actually
Yeah.
leave, put a less effort onto that one and put a more effort on spending on the money on the ads itself. So I guess
Yeah.
that's something a good way to actually fill out a pipeline and convert them as a high paying client. So yeah,
Yeah.
now that's pretty good.
Yeah.
Just a very final
Exactly.
question, Jeff, is like, what are the best lead magnets you reckon that the people can actually use, especially in the agency business, SEO agency? Let's take an example that they can use to build out basically a trust and to get a high paying clients as well.
Yeah. So it's a really interesting question. So um there's two that I like to do, and they're not necessarily lead magnets, but just hooks that bring people in. One
Yep.
is that I like to give like a scorecard, get a
Okay.
free scorecard or strategy session. So
Hmm.
like the person I'm not selling you anything. I'm just going to tell you where you're at right now. And so
Okay.
I have a scorecard template I've been using for the last 15 years, and it works like a charm. I basically point out where they need help, and they're like, "Yep, I need help." And then I say, "Well, if you want me to help you, then we can work together, right?" And then you get into a full pitch. So a scorecard is a great way to just tell them where they are, and you're the one who identified the problem, so they're most likely to use you as a solution because nobody else gives them that. Everybody else is like trying to pitch them without proving that they need it. So a
Yep.
scorecard is great, and that's what we use at all of our businesses is a scorecard. The second one is just taking somebody and telling them how to do it themselves, letting them realize how hard it is, and then they want to come back to you because they need somebody to implement it. So it could be a checklist, it could be a
Yep.
training of some sort, it could be an audit, but basically telling them exactly what they need to do. But then
Yep.
when they realize they can't do it themselves, then they come into you. Those are the two ones that work the best for me
All
because
right.
it's not a hard sale. It's just helping them identify the problem, and the more
Yep.
aware they are of that thing, they realize that they don't have the desire to do it, the
Yep.
efficiency to do it, or the knowledge to do it. And then you're in the driver's seat after that.
After that, yeah. No, that's super awesome stuff, man. I mean, like that's really good to talk about the leads, how to best convert those leads, how to build out the brand, and what is the actually the step-by-step process would be to scale the agency as well, and then do a measurable data-driven approach to take it to the next level. So now that's pretty good. So Jeff, anyone who really wants to know more about you, want to read your stuff, do the courses, you said like SEMrush could be the good place where you got a course as well. Anything on the Google Ads as well?
So SEMrush is a free course just to get started, but at datadrivenyou.com, we have so many free resources around Google Ads and Facebook ads and everything around traffic. We also
Sure.
have measurement courses around Google Analytics for Tag Manager, stuff like that. So that's
Yep.
datadrivenyou.com, and you can check out all of our, the free stuff, start with that, get on our email list, and then you can see the paid stuff. We have a paid membership that's really fantastic that
Yep.
basically it's there with you as you develop your career out. So it will always be there for you and it'll always be up to date with what you need to do. And then we
Yep.
have a new brand called profitschool.com where I do coaching for agencies specifically. So I help agencies and service businesses become more profitable, help them
Yep.
get their unique selling proposition in place, and help them go to market so they can scale. So I have that's the focus of our profitschool.com brand. And that allows
No.
people to do that. And both of these things have a free community, and that
Yep.
free community is a way to just keep up to date, interact with us, interact with our instructors and
Yep.
our team. And then eventually, if you're ready and you want to take the next step, that's what we exist to do, is to
Yep.
help you take that next step in a more calculated and efficient way.
No worries. I'll put it on all these links in the video
Cool.
description once it goes live. All right. No, thanks for that, Jeff. I really appreciate your time one more time. And yeah, there's definitely, like I said, there is a lot more to talk to you, and we'll see if in the future we can set up a time again, and we can have a more detailed talk on this data-driven approach.
Love it. That's great. That
And
sounds awesome. Thanks for everything.
I really appreciate that. Thank you.
All right. Cheers. Thanks.